Hey guys, what's going on? I want to welcome you back. I am Eric. I am our Next Steps pastor, and we are in our series World Changers, where we've been trying to answer this question, man, how can we change the world, especially when we see so much happening right now in our world? Our goal has been to work off of a foundation. And for us, the foundation is a text that we're anchoring to. It's in the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. And that's what we're trying to draw a foundation from, because so often, guys, our worldview tries to be created from what's being projected at us. But instead, we want our worldview to form from a healthy foundation. And that's where that verse comes into play. And that's what we're going to talk about more. But before we jump into that, I just got to this place where, man, if I'm being honest, it brings back a lot of memories for me. Even now, it makes me kind of anxious. Come with me, and I'll tell you more about it. All right, guys, we are here. We're at the spot I was talking about. And man, I have so many memories that are going through my mind right now, because when I was at a place exactly like this, I did something that was just extreme and something where I had to take a risk, a huge risk, probably one of the biggest risks that I've ever taken in my life. And the reason I'm starting there is because when I look at our passage, when I look at Micah 6:8 and what we're going to talk about today, it requires you and I to take a risk. It requires this extreme way of treating people. But before we jump into that, I want to recap real fast, because last week we talked about what it was to act justly. But I want to reread our verse again. This is in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. And it says, "And the Lord has shown you, O mortal, what is good by..." O mortal, he's referring to man or woman, right? And then what does the Lord require of you? So he's saying, if you want to know what I require of you, here it is. And he breaks it down into three things. And he says, 1, to act justly. 2, love mercy. And 3, walk humbly with your God. Last week we talked about what it is to act justly. We've got to treat people with a fairness regardless of the color of our skin or the places where we live or how much money we have or where we go to school, all these different things. Because we were created, all races, all people were created in the image of God. And because of that, because God treated us with a fairness, we can treat others with a fairness. But today I want to talk about what it is to love mercy, because it's extreme. And one of the ways that we're going to highlight this is by looking at a new minor prophet. Right now we've been talking about Micah, and that's a minor prophet, which is just a person that God used to deliver a message. But there's another minor prophet, Hosea, I want to look at, and I want to tell you guys more about in the extreme example that God used in his life. All right, guys, so in this book, Hosea, there's a lot going on that I want us to see. But one of the biggest things is it's this picture of a married couple, and there's Hosea and Gomer, his wife. And all we know is that they had children together, and at one point, everything just falls apart in their marriage because his wife commits adultery. And by adultery in this case, I just mean that she begins to sell her body for money. And what happens, and this is why this is like such an extreme thing, God tells Hosea, I want you to go and find your wife. And not only that, I want you to pay off her debts to her lovers, and then I want you to repledge your love and your commitment to her. But also why this is extreme is because by Old Testament law, guys, adultery was one of those things that you could be killed for and stoned. Culture would have said, we are within our rights to kill you for what you did. But God said, no, this is what I want you to do. And live out this living illustration in front of the people. But here's what else is going on in the story. Because not only is it a picture of their marriage, but it's also a picture of God's relationship with Israel. Because in many ways, God is like a faithful husband to Israel. He saved them out of captivity in this point in time where they were slaves, and he rescued them. He takes them into this land, this promised land that is this rich land, and the only thing he says, I want from you is to be loyal to me, to be devoted to me. But instead, unfortunately, Israel takes all that abundance that God gives them and they devote it to a pagan god. And so God has this moment where he's within his rights to say, I'm just going to break my covenant with Israel. I'm going to divorce them. But instead, we see that he renews his covenant with them. And he does it all from this place for the love and the mercy that he has for them. When we look at mercy, it's this extreme case that we see in Hosea. It's this extreme moment where he shows mercy in a way that just probably made people's heads turn. I mean, just put yourself in the story for a moment. Imagine if you were there. Imagine how people were talking. Imagine how they were looking at Hosea and Gomer and the kind of conversations that were happening. But that's the kind of example that God wants us to live out when it comes to mercy, when it comes to showing mercy, that kind of living illustration. You see, now let me unpack this for you guys a bit more, because I would even go a step further and say if we're really going to define this, this is a kind of kindness, a kind of way of treating people that, it's extreme, but it's also places where we sacrifice. It's a no strings attached kind of love. And I think guys, a lot of times we want to show mercy. I think we do. But I think we fall into this trap where we say, well, Eric, I'm willing to show mercy as long as I don't have to show it to that person who wronged me. Or, all these restrictions with COVID, the way the schools have changed, the changes we've had to endure in a youth group, maybe that's caused a response where we just say, well, that's just stupid and that's dumb. Where we could choose to show mercy and kindness. Or maybe it's just online gaming, social media, because I know that these environments, man, they can be a volatile place. But what if we chose, instead of tearing one another down on our news feeds and in these, places where we're gaming, what if we chose to show mercy and actually build people up? All right, so as you guys probably could guess, I went skydiving, and I want to go back to that moment, and I want to go back to the risk I took and how extreme that was. Okay, because this is what I think God wants to say to us, not only by what we see in Hosea, but what we see in Micah, that when it comes to showing mercy, it is this extreme thing, because it's not something we normally do on our own. It has to be something that is greater than you and I. And when I was up in that plane, guys, the only thing that I was attached to was the instructor. And I remember that. I mean, just imagine the door opens, all the wind just comes pouring into the cabin, and I have to look out into what I'm about to jump into and give up control and trust in that one that I'm attached to. And that's the only way I was able to do that. And that's what God is saying to us. He wants us to view our relationship with him in that way and believe that if we fully attach ourselves and commit ourselves to him, man, he can teach us how to show mercy so much that it becomes something that we love to do, even if people around us are hard to show that to. All right, guys, so as we wrap up, I want to go back to that experience real quick, because here's what I want to tell you. When I skydived years ago, I had no idea how much God was going to use that experience to change my mind, change my perspective, just not only on how to treat people, but just learning more about who God is. And my challenge for you guys as we leave here is to be someone who shows mercy so much that it's just something that you love to do. And again, the only way you can do that, the only way it's possible, is to attach yourself to the one who can do that in and through your life. I love you guys. I'm praying for you and can't wait to see you next week for part 3.